Good morning. I am Saini at the University of Canberra, and I am in my weekly conversation with Michelle Grattan. Good morning.
Hi, Deep.
Michelle, this is our first interview of the year, and when we last spoke before Christmas, I had hoped that we'll have a nice break and we'll come back to a country where everything is going in a positive direction. So we come back today, and the first thing we have to talk about is Barnaby Joyce. Things haven't gone very well for him over the last few weeks, before we go into the details of it, tell me where you think Barnaby Joyce stands at this point in his career.
I think he's in a dreadful place. Basically, he's been trashed by the Prime Minister. I can't see how their relationship can be repaired. He's been left discredited. His whole personal sordid saga has come into the public arena in this dramatic fashion. His party is at this point standing behind him, but members of it know that his position may become untenable with a bad backlash from the electorate. Now, how it's going to play out from here, nobody can be sure at this point. But from Barnaby Joyce's point of view, someone who wanted the leadership so much, who prepared himself for it, who acted quite well in it in the beginning, it really has just all turned into a series of negatives.
Now, he is the Deputy Prime Minister.
At this point.
At this point. He's being sent off for a week by the Prime Minister. That is a fairly strong action on the part of Malcolm Turnbull. Should we read into this that Turnbull is really saying, I'd rather that you be gone?
I think Turnbull certainly would rather he be gone. He was, of course, due to be acting Prime Minister next week when Malcolm Turnbull is overseas. The Prime Minister said twice during the week in question time that would be the case. And then on Thursday, he announced that Barnaby Joyce was taking a week's leave. And I think at that moment, it showed really that Barnaby Joyce shouldn't be Deputy Prime Minister, because if he couldn't act in a week, it's a pretty routine function, even though he's been through this crisis, then what are his arguments for staying in the job?
And the Prime Minister has used some unusually strong words to describe the conduct, and then he's moved on to make a declaration that there will be no sexual relationship between politicians and their staffers going forward. That also is a turnaround, 180 degrees within a week, where just last week the government was saying they don't even want to talk about this. Is that actually a moral position the Prime Minister is taking, or is this essentially facing the political reality and talking from that knowledge that the government really has its back to the wall now?
Well, I think the political reality dictated that he chose to take a moral position. Now, the moral position reflects his own views, but a week ago he was staying his hand with that moral position. He was saying this is a private, personal matter for Barnaby Joyce, and it's all very sad for the family. On Thursday, what he was saying was Barnaby Joyce's judgment in having an affair with a young staffer was appallingly bad, essentially, and that everyone was shocked, and that the Deputy Prime Minister knew he'd behaved badly, and there was more as well from Malcolm Turnbull. It was an incredible personal attack on the Deputy Prime Minister and really took everyone by surprise, and Barnaby Joyce had no knowledge that was coming. Now, on the ban on sexual relations, that was discussed among the senior members of the coalition, and there seemed to be support for that. But of course now Malcolm Turnbull's coming under criticism, with people saying, well, it's not going to be enforceable and it's just a diversion from the issues about Barnaby Joyce's arrangements for the staffer that he was having the affair with the fact that he got free accommodation from a businessman in Armidale, all sorts of other issues. So while the ban you can say is in a way common sense, or at least while it's common sense not to have ministers having affairs with their staff, a formal ban becomes a different sort of issue to defend. But it is interesting that a week ago, when we had the ban passed by the House of Representatives in the United States, and when we had crossbencher Cathy McGowan here saying, well, let's have a conversation about workplace relations in Parliament House, the government said this is laughable. Yep. Absolutely laughable. They were dismissing it all over the place. Suddenly, they're certainly going even further than Cathy McGowan was saying a week ago. And while this is not a legislated ban, as in the US, it is essentially the same thing. So there's been that huge U-turn, as you say, in just a few days.
So speaking of the U-turn, you know, as an Australian, if one were to ask, okay, so I have a Prime Minister or a government that takes a diametrically opposite view within a week on the same issue, would the real government please stand up? Which one should we believe?
Well, it looks like a government that's desperate, doesn't it? Yeah. And remember that a month ago, everyone was saying how well Malcolm Turnbull was starting the year, all the pressure was on Bill Shorten, and now you've got what has become essentially a coalition crisis. It's become an issue far beyond the specifics of a minister having an affair and his wife and family being devastated, because what's happening now is that a lot of nationals are saying, well, these Liberals, including the Prime Minister, are trying to tell us who our leader should be. They're interfering. So the Nationals are getting their backs up over this issue of Liberal meddling, and may rally more behind Barnaby Joyce. We just don't know yet, but this could play out in all sorts of unpredictable ways.
While this was going on, we had the release of Closing the Gap report that came on the 10th anniversary of Kevin Rudd's apology to the Aboriginal people, and yet the noise around Barnaby Joyce affair has apparently completely drowned what is, I believe, a very significant national issue. What are your comments on that?
Well, certainly it got less attention than it might have otherwise. But of course, this is a perennial issue. We get this report every year. The results are always mixed. Sometimes they're more mixed to the negative, sometimes slightly more to the positive. This report showed that progress was being made in 3 out of the 7 areas that were covered, but nevertheless, everyone knows the progress is slow. It's something that, while there's general agreement that more should be done, what you can do extra is just never clear. There's always argument about that. And meanwhile, the prospects for changing the Constitution to recognise Indigenous people have diminished greatly in the past few months. So all in all, that's a picture that I think is very disappointing for the nation.
Well, let's hope that we'll have an opportunity soon to talk about something more positive about the country and our politicians. Thank you very much, Michelle. You have a very nice day.
Thanks, Steve.